Okay. Welcome to the prophetic outlook. I just checked my mic is on okay. Guys, if you can do me the usual favor, if you can like, if you can share, if you can comment. And yes, I know that I had put up a statement that I was not doing a video this evening, but I feel like I'm being provoked to. And the reason I feel like I'm being provoked to is because I'm looking at some headlines, and I guess I'm kind of moved in that sense to um, connect dots and look at what is actually happening in the world right now. Um, when we saw that what has happened over the last day or two, that Germany has now signed a €5 billion deal to supply weapons to Ukraine. Well, that doesn't bat a lot of eyelids, to be honest. Other than when you look at what is actually happening, other than you look that Germany's economy has went from one of energy based now seemingly into a military industrial complex. And Germany is not alone in this. What you're seeing is the UK and France get on board with the same policies, specifically the change of past agreements. And what I'm talking about here is that now you're seeing Germany and effectively France and the UK and America willing to supply Ukraine with these much longer range missiles. So, what you've got here is the German Taurus missile, which has the capability of striking areas like Moscow, so that Ukraine can now go past the conflict zone and strike deep into the heart of Russian civilian territory. Now, obviously, this is going to do a couple of different things. It's going to give the war some legs to keep going, and it's going to provoke, I believe, from Putin's eyes, a much wider scope for the war in terms of the if Putin is looking at this, that the Western countries such as France, UK, and America are supplying Ukraine with weapons to fire directly into civilian territory, heavily populated civilian territory in the heart of Russia, then he is going to look at that through his eyes and see that what America, France, and the UK are doing, and Germany are doing, is they're fighting a proxy war through Russia or through Ukraine. Similar to how Iran does it through Hezbollah and Hamas and so on. Now, in these terms that have been sort of put out there, you're seeing, like I said, Germany moved to being a military industrial complex, but you're also seeing that within the UK and you're seeing that within France. And that is not something by surprise. If we went back to the likes of 2024, what we had was army chiefs in the UK saying the UK must double its lethality or be prepared for war. In other words, it's talking about doubling the army and the military base and the weapons base by 2027 and tripling it by the end of the decade. In other words, turning the UK into a military industrial complex. France has a waning economy as well, and they're looking to do the same. Now, America's provocation to do all of this might be slightly different. I think it's possibly because of the friction that has grown between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, but that's a guess. But what I am seeing, and what is specifically interesting for me, is that in the last 2 months, we have seen a move for the European Defence Union. And the European Defence Union, or the EDU, um, has sought to supply a standing army for Europe. Okay. There's been an agreement by Keir Starmer and Ursula von der Leyen that Starmer would supply British troops for conflict that affected the EU. So, what we're seeing is the rise of the European Union, and we're seeing individual countries step into militarization that isn't new, was talked about that, and it seems to be a policy of sorts. But this militarization is kind of, in my opinion, like the beast system, like the European Union reconstituted Roman Empire system that seems to be developing right now, it is trying to give teeth to that system, trying to give some power to that system. And I think that this is something to be aware of. So Merz in Germany had basically said there are no more range limitations for weapons delivered to Ukraine. Now, how do you think Vladimir Putin will view that? Do you think that that will provoke, and actually a Hungarian expert, wartime expert, actually said that this is going to provoke possible deaths and attacks upon German territory from Russia? They're accelerating the military system, they're accelerating wars, and they're doing so whilst building this EU stroke reconstituted Roman Empire that has a backing to some degree in terms of prophecy. So we know that prophecy tells us that when we look at things like Revelation 13 and Revelation 17, that there will be a system in place that will allow for the arrival of the lawless one, the son of perdition, the pseudo Christ, the antichrist, onto the scene. But before he comes on the scene, there will be this system in place, and this system will effectively be an empire, and it'll be an empire that has 10 monarch rulership type systems in place. Now, I believe that will be global, but because of Daniel and the prophecy of, it's the prince of the peoples when it's talking about the destruction of the temple, that it will be reconstituted Rome, aka the European Union. Now, if we looked at the European Union 5 years ago, it would not have fitted into much of the terminology surrounding the beast system, surrounding the development of that empire. As in, maybe it's got a little bit of strength, but maybe it's a bit weak at the same time, the iron and clay mixture. But let's just put that to the side. There was not the cohesion because if we go back to 2016, we had Brexit. But in terms of the Brexit and the removal from of the UK, which weakened Europe, what we've seen in this last few months is Starmer stealthily come along and basically join us back up into Europe in terms of selling fishing rights away, selling out the British farmers, but also allowing for the increase of the military capability of the European system. Now, Ursula von der Leyen, and if you can actually read these reports, I've done a video on this, so I don't need to do it again. But you can look at these reports and you can see that they have said that when it comes to the likes of Europe as an entity, not as individual nations, it should be nuclearized. So it's not talking about the UK, which is a nuclear nation, having its own nuclear weapons. It's talking about the European Union having nuclear capability. And I believe that the growth of militarization of Germany and Germany poking the bear, so to speak, in terms of supplying long range missiles to Ukraine to continue and to give legs to the Ukrainian war machine, and the UK jumping on board, and France jumping on board, and America coming into tow on this. I think what you're seeing is the growth of the military industrial complex, specifically within Europe, to allow for that reconstituted Roman Empire to come through. Now, I find this really interesting, but I also find it quite alarming. If you'd went back to the start of 2024, actually right through to September of 2024, we done videos on this. And we covered a whole load of news reports, sound bites in which generals, in which naval leaders, uh, military leaders in terms of the army, all came out and they used this date. They said that these countries, whether it was Germany, whether it was the UK, or whether it was France, better be prepared for conflict by 2027. Now, we've done videos on this, so I don't need to repeat this, but I think that this is interesting. Why are they stipulating a future date in which they are saying that all of these countries need to be conflict ready unless they are preparing for conflict at that date. So when we look at something like Germany supplying long range missiles that can now go into civilian territory, not only is it going to provoke Putin, not only is it going to lead to, it's no longer just sitting on the borders trying to provoke a fight. Now we're seeing a continual progression to provoke more, to provoke maybe Putin into attacking other countries, in which the whole European war machine, and at this stage with the backing of America, can come against Vladimir Putin. Now you might say, well, why do we care about that? Because the point to that is the galvanizing of this reconstituted Roman Empire, and the victims in all of this would be the general public. If you go back to 2023 and 2024, prime ministers, foreign leaders were all talking about conscription. We're all talking about enacting conscription back in to the system. In fact, um, Rishi Sunak, previous prime minister, ran his re-election campaign off the back of that policy, that he would reinstitute national service and conscription. So why are they doing that? Well, again, it is because they realize that a couple of things are happening. One, the economy is dropping. The economy's in a tailspin. So if you militarize it, you've got an economic machine happening based off the fact of being at war, based off the fact that you've got to sell arms to this country and sell arms to that country, and therefore you're making things. If you keep the war machine going, then you need fodder for the war machine, and that happens to be the people. So that's alarming. But at the same time, not only is it concerning that they're preparing for this war, and that we heard all this again, the same rhetoric. I don't have the newspaper clippings in front of me now, but I've already shown them in the past, that they kept saying 2027, 2027, 2027. For me, the alarming part of this is that regardless of people being able to read the headlines and see this, we're heading in this direction anyway. The governments are doing what they want, regardless of democratic opposition to their plans to turn France, Germany, the UK into a military industrial complex, and to do so by poking a bear, poking the proverbial bear, Russia, into further and further escalation by fighting through a proxy, by arming the proxy to fire directly into Moscow. So they're doing that. And the purpose behind that, again, is twofold. One, it keeps the military financial machine going at the expense of humanity. And two, it facilitates the growth of a reconstituted Roman Empire, which will be partially strong, partially weak, and we are seeing build now. I covered the video last week when I talked about Ursula von der Leyen and her 800 billion war chest for the EDU, the European Defence Union, and how Britain, how under Keir Starmer, had sold out the British people by basically stipulating that, our army is at your disposal. Oh, and by the way, our army is at your disposal. Why don't you take all our fishing waters at the same time? I think that we're entering into dangerous territory, but it's not to be afraid of this. The whole point is that if you're aware of prophecy, not only are you forewarned, you're forenabled, you are equipped for what comes at you, because you'll not shake at the prospect of things, because you know that your faith and your hope and your trust is in the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So we're in this new period of escalation. And like I said, Germany have signed a €5 billion deal with Ukraine to continually send Ukraine these weapons. It's an industrial military complex with the goal of maintaining a financial economy based off war, but also with rebuilding and setting Europe aside as an entity onto its own, where it's no longer just an economic partnership among countries and a political judicial partnership among countries, but it will be a war machine at the center, and a standing army, as is their goal. It was certainly the goal of Emmanuel Macron. It's certainly the goal, by the looks of it, of Ursula von der Leyen. And unfortunately, despite opposition from member states, uh, the legislation around joining the European Union has allowed for mandatory joining of the EDU, European Defence Union, regardless of member states' opposition to it. So the framework is set to build a standing army for Europe. The framework is set to build a reconstituted Roman Empire. Now, as for me, I look at this and I go, well, that shows me that the beast system is developing. That shows me that we're getting to the point of prophetic convergence, prophetic fulfillment. That means that our time is short. That means that wars and rumors of wars are happening. Matthew 24 talks about this, not just wars and rumors of wars, but we see deception through the roof, and we see earthquakes continuing. We see the reports of mega quakes on the horizon. All of this to say, do not worry, do not let your heart be troubled. Put your faith and hope in Jesus Christ. When you start to see these things, it's like sitting on Noah's Ark and realizing, oh, there's the first raindrop, right? We know what's coming, so we need to be in the place where we know that we are protected, that we are equipped, that we are enabled, that we are surrounded by the love of God, and we have to let God shut the door of the world for us. In other words, use these signs as a realization of knowing who you have to sit with. So if you're not born again today, if you're not saved today, now is the time to give your heart to Jesus Christ, not just out of fear of what's coming, but when you realize that when you walk with Jesus Christ, fear, worry, stress, anxiety, all of those things are spirits that are not to be part of you. When you put your hope in Jesus Christ, you walk with him. Psalm 16:11 says that you have the fullness of joy. So regardless of circumstance, you're still walking in joy because you know who you walk with. Sickness comes to your door, hardship comes to your door, economic persecution and all of this, religious persecution, and you can still have joy because you know who you serve. So don't be shaken by things, but understand when you start to see, just like when you start to see decorations uh, go up, for Christmas, it's not that far away, and you know that you got to get prepared. Now is the time. If you do not know Jesus, get prepared, get to know him. And I don't mean just by, like a lot of people will tell you, saying a prayer and that's it. No, it's being in the word daily. It's praying with him. It's being in communion with him. It's going for a walk and understanding that he walks with you. It's understanding that wherever you go, you're never left, you're never forsaken, that he is with you. And as such, fear, worry, stress, all of that stuff can go to the side because you're walking in the fullness of joy. So I just wanted to jump on here just to say, like I said, we've seen these reports that, these missiles are being sent. Obviously, Zelensky is happening. We know that if we go back to last year, that, like I said, the reports are war is coming, and this war is not going to be basically regional, it'll be spread. But we've seen that even a Hungarian expert has issued warnings after this decision that, not if you're going to strike, allow or facilitate the striking in Russian territory, be prepared that Russia, the bear, will strike back. And as Mertz has said, there's no limitations now for weapons delivered. So it's these weapons, it's the Taurus that we're talking about. And I just want us to realize, look, regardless of all of that, our hope and our faith is in the Lord Jesus Christ. So, guys, join us tomorrow. Join us Tuesday. We will be live 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 7 p.m. BST. And we will be talking about secret societies, cults, and how they are coming to the fore now and how they have been underground to come to the fore now. So we'll be talking about that tomorrow. And then we got Bible study and stuff on Wednesday. So, guys, God bless. I call you the head and not the tail, above, not beneath, kings, queens, and priests in Jesus' mighty name. And remember, you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. Guys,